Welcome everybody, and I've already advanced slides. I hope you're all doing well today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. I'm Catherine Hilst, and I am the Operations Manager for the IS-BAO program. We are very excited to present these IBAC Roundtable sessions. We're focusing on safety topics that are relevant to the global business aviation industry, and today's is the second roundtable hosted by our IS-BAO Progressive Stage 3 leadership team. We're looking at unified SOPs, aligning SOPs across your organization. We have a fabulous panel here today. I have a couple of housekeeping items for everybody as you're logging in. One of them is that you are on mute now as you listen to this, and you can send us a question through the questions panel on the control panel for GoToWebinar. And please feel free to submit your questions throughout the panel presentation. We will address those at the end of the presentation. For the rest, I want to say I see a lot of familiar names. It's very exciting to see you all here. This is going to be a great presentation. And before we get started, I would like to turn this over to our program director, Ben Walsh, for some welcome, and Andy after him. Ben, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Catherine. I appreciate that. Again, my welcome to everyone. Whether you're an IS-BAO participant in the early stages, stage 1 through the classic programs at Progressive Stage 3, a new auditor, a longtime auditor, you are what makes this program what it is. This is your program, this IS-BAO. We need to be responsive to you, and we're very grateful to you. It's an honor for us as a team. We talk about all the time how amazingly diverse our sector is and the challenges you face each and every day. You're the professionals, and you're there for a reason. And so we're very honored to work with you and be part of this. Right off the bat, we're very honored to have Andy Meyer. He's the director of our ICAO liaison up in Montreal, standing there for you for business aviation at the ICAO level. So I'd like to hand it over to Andy for a quick update on some of the topics of interest that are churning there at ICAO. Andy, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ben, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to be here at the roundtable and talk to those people and talk to the operators that we represent here in Montreal. And we represent your interests. As Ben said, this is your program, and we're representing your interests here at ICAO. Since the last time I spoke on the roundtable, not much has changed up here in ICAO in terms of what's the hot topic. COVID-19 still seems to dominate the discussions that we have. And then to this end, I'm also very pleased and honored to say that IBAC has been chosen to develop for ICAO a workshop on public health. And I also have to say thank you to some of you that contribute to this effort. So you can see that we're taking seriously at ICAO. ICAO looks at us as being a sector that is agnostic to political interests, but we're pushing forward safety and the security of aviation. So we're seen as a global player and as an important player, and we've been asked to contribute to this. Besides the efforts that we're doing with COVID and at the CASC, the public health panel at ICAO, we also are very grateful that we were able to nominate somebody to represent the business aviation interests at the remotely piloted aircraft panel at ICAO. So we're very glad that we found somebody that is representing there. We have also found an extremely knowledgeable person that represents our community's interest at the licensing panel. That is a newly created body at ICAO that is mostly looking at personal licensing in the next 10-15 years. Whatever it includes, electronic licensing, cross-border license, and so on. So we were able to secure a place there, and we have a permanent representation at that panel, which I'm really happy about it. Besides this, the long-standing contribution that IBAC has at the safety management panel, I think this is really important for this program, that we influence what ICAO is doing in terms of safety management and in terms of regulations that are coming our way. I think very recent discussion that have evolved in the safety management panel are focusing on the scalability of safety management programs, and also to a degree to the extent of safety management programs. Who should be covered, who should be required, who should be mandated to have SMS, and what are possible acceptable means to comply with such requirements that may come forward. We're also discussing if SMS and how SMS should be applicable to ground handling providers, which would be FBOs in our world. So this is exciting and challenging. I think this year, just to give you a little bit of a focus or outlook, what we're focusing up here in ICAO this year, it is the year of security culture. So we'll have some involvement with the security panel. It is also a year of change. As I said, in the safety management panel, we're working very extensively on the amendment of the Annex 19 that is hopefully coming through in June, July. We're finishing work on the public health. We're looking at remotely piloted aircrafts. And I think what's exciting and something new is also the innovation part that ICAO has just started. IBAC is, again, through representation here at ICAO, involved in the new entrance discussion, whatever that should be, supersonic, high altitude, whatever is out there and whatever is new. We are in that panel, in that forum that discusses how those new entrants should be included in the existing air transport sector. I think with this, I have summed it up very well what we're doing up here. There's lots of little things going on, but I think these are the hot topics and the topics of interest to you. But I would like to underline once more that I'm here up in Montreal to really represent your interest. And this program is certainly one of the important cornerstones of our work, because safety is, I'd say, this takes up most of our representative work here at ICAO. With that, over to you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Andy's working very hard, and if what you heard, something strikes your interest or you have a particular concern, he does place volunteers. We do work with the industry because that's how we direct our inputs there at ICAO. So please reach out to Andy or any of us if you have concerns, questions, comments, or input for what's going on at ICAO. That's our founding purpose, was to be a vanguard for our sector for business aviation, and all that works down to our programs as well, so that we can be more effective to you in the sector. Some of the updates with the programs, they are evolving. We're working on the small operator efforts to be very responsive and scalable to that sector. Some new things behind the scenes with the member associations that will be evolving and coming out over the next year or two, hopefully, to open things up in a different way for that owner operator and that small flight department, the micro operator. The Progressive program is growing rapidly. I want to thank everybody that's helped us roll that out this year. And here's one of the deliverables from that, is the leadership of these operators stepping up. We're in the background supporting, and the leadership team, are directing the program. We're also working to get you recognition you deserve for going above and beyond. So I'm talking to regulators and authorities around the world on a regular basis to make sure they understand when an IS-BAO operator is there and they see that certificate, or whether you're involved in the SAF experiment with the French, or part of another program that we have going on around the world, or even some that are coming close to home soon, that they understand exactly what you're doing to go above and beyond, because you are. You don't have to do this. You're doing it because you're a leader and you're pursuing excellence. Quickly, I think I have a slide there. Next slide, please, to mention the leadership team. So, we had a beta group for several years that helped us design and work through the initial rollout. At the end of the year, we wound up exceeding our goal by 20%. And so far, we have an exponential growth rate initially on the transitions. Both programs, whether classic or progressive, are great. It's up to you which one you prefer. And those that are in the from the various operators in the progressive leadership team are mentioned here. It's too many to name right now, and I'm very grateful for what they're doing for the sector. and sharing amongst our community. Also, if you would, next slide, the Progressive auditors. I'm honored by the auditors we have on both Classic and Progressive programs. This is who's involved right now. We are opening up Europe and the Middle East, the Progressive Stage 3. Our first launch with Shell Aviation is about to begin, the Progressive side there. And hopefully there'll be more in that sector and others around the world. Initially, these evolved around some COVID issues, which was hot on everyone's mind. And this is by the direction of our Progressive leadership team. And certainly there's a lot of tentacles associated with that, like today's topic, breaking down the barriers between the various departments. COVID's turned everything upside down. Some of you are not as proficient as you used to be. Things have changed, whether in the cockpit or on the ramp or in dispatch or the home office. So today's topic is a great one that's going to talk about how we do that, and from some real experiences from real operators just like you. And I really am grateful and I appreciate this time. Catherine, take it away.
Thanks, Ben. And thank you to all of our audience members for being here and the operators who are making this possible. I am going to now introduce our panel who will be discussing SOPs and aligning SOPs across your organization. Gary Dietz is our moderator for the day. Thank you for all of your hard efforts on this. He's the chief pilot of a Fortune 100 flight operation, IS-BAO. He's on the IS-BAO PS3 leadership team and is also an IS-BAO, the ground handling side of our house, board member there. Blair Robson, manager of the aircraft maintenance and aviation facilities for a large corporate flight department in Texas, and he is on the NBAA CAM and the PS3 leadership team. Jared Taylor, safety captain fixed wing for Johnson & Johnson, and is on the PS3 leadership team as well. And then Amanda Ferraro, who has been instrumental with helping us get the progressive programs and the training going, is the CEO of Aviation Safety Solutions, developer of IS-BAO Flight Plan Stage 1. Thank you, Amanda. Program and trainer with IS-BAO auditors, and is also an international G550 captain and involved with NBA and the CAM program. So with that, I am going to turn this over to you marvelous panelists, and I look forward to the next hour or so of your conversation. Gary, take it away.
All right, thanks, Catherine. Let me know if we have any audio difficulties, and we'll work through them. But I want to start off by quoting directly from a recent article from the Los Angeles Times newspaper. Quote, "Because I had not flown in a few months, I was rusty," the first officer who forgot to activate the anti-icing mechanism said in the anonymous report to a safety reporting system run by NASA. "I felt that my recollection was strong enough, but in reality, I should have taken some time to review the standard operating procedures," end of quote. Today, this panel is going to focus on one key component of any strong, just culture. And what I'm talking about is the SOPs within our organization. And Catherine, if you would advance to the next slide, please. From the flight crews to the cabin to ground crews, dispatch, line service, every group within your organization should have some type of standard operating procedure. And again, so what this panel is going to cover is why is it important to have alignment. The previous roundtable, we pretty much focused on some flight crew SOPs and how to deal with COVID. This one we're going, and I'll tell you right now, we're going to focus very deeply on the maintenance aspect of it, but we will include an auditor's point of view. We'll include a safety officer's point of view. So during a recent Progressive Stage 3 leadership meeting, we discussed several topics, from how do we restart the business aviation to over 800 plus ASR reports for the month of January, to the comments in some of these reports, to put it all under one heading of don't know why I did that, but I did. to where and what do I do to keep the team efficient and effective without compromising safety. So again, I'm honored to be here with this panel. One thing I do want to remind everybody, even though this panel may come from some larger organizations, the principle is the same, regardless of the size of your organization, regardless if you're stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, or working on the new progressive stage 3. Your mission statement should be the same as any large organization. And again, this panel is going to help us answer 2 questions today: why and how. Now, obviously, we're not going to be able to solve all the answer all the questions today, but we just want, our goal today is to plant a seed to either emphasize or to enhance what you already have underway within your operation, or to plant the seed to help you get started. All of us started at one stage or the other. And in a true continuous improvement organization, you keep asking, what am I doing well, and what can I do better? What can we do well? What can we do better? Amanda, I'm going to be asking you a question here. I have you start us off first. There's many operators out there. There's many auditors out there. And I know you and the rest of the auditors within the IS-BAO program, you're trying to drive consistency in the audit experience so that we, the operators, we hear consistency in winning as one. We see and hear consistency from the direction that IS-BAO provides to us. What do you see out there? Let's start with, why should I have SOPs within my organization? Amanda?
Gary, I would love to answer that question, especially from my vantage point, as I said, as an auditor for IBAC and several other of our standard organizations. I see a gamut of operators, right? I see the best of the best to sometimes the worst of the worst, right? Where I'm helping those operators pick up after an accident, or maybe they've had a near accident. You want to raise the safety bar in your organization. You do it by simply taking a look at your standard operating procedures, at your SOPs, and your culture. You know, I would tell you that there's a lot of reasons why we should have SOPs. And I can see, typically as an auditor, I see everything from operators pushing back, well, we really don't want to document that, or we don't want a manual that's 300 pages, to those operators that are just very willing to write down what their procedures are. But the reason why that we should do this is because it sets a foundational component for safety. When we have expectations that are written down from our leadership within our organization, and when we have engagement with a team in the interfacing of our departments because of that written documentation, the expectations of how we behave and how we conduct business become very clear to our staff, to our employees, and to our company. And it becomes a professional doing the right thing for not only just our team members, but doing the right thing for our company.
Appreciate your comments, Amanda. You know, many times, and tell me if you've heard this out there. You go into an organization, well, yeah, that's their SOP. Here's my SOP. How often do you hear, here's our SOP?
Pretty rare. I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I look at operators' SOPs, it's not usually it's something that's established by maybe one individual in the organization, that when the department was formed or when the organization was formed, it's not usually a team type of event. And I think that, you know, as a team, and when we talk about, and I'm not just talking about the pilots or flight crew or flight operations, I'm talking about every single operation and business unit within your group that are interfacing with that flight department internal. So dispatch, maintenance, line service, cabin attendants, all those groups together and collectively should be participating as a whole to enhance your standard operating procedures, to make sure that you're doing what you say that you're doing and that it's written down. I really do think we have a professional service to deliver to our industry, which is staying current on our aircraft, being qualified and having the knowledge, and knowing what the expectations are when it comes to operating the aircraft on behalf of our company.
Amanda, I heard you use the word expectations a couple times in our conversation here today. I wrote down a quote from one of our recent Progressive Stage meetings. I'm not quite sure who said this. I'm not going to take credit for it. It was somebody on the leadership table. Quote, setting expectations of a slower operational pace, end of quote. And we were discussing about returning to normal, trying to get businesses geared up, trying to have flight crews, everybody that you see on this slide here, flight crews to maintenance to dispatch, everyone, not only being current, but maintain a high level of proficiency. The bottom line is it comes down to our SOPs. So Jared, I want to turn to you now as safety officer at your operations. Why was there a need for alignment of SOPs within your organization?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gary. First off, I'm really excited to be here with this group of panelists. Yeah, an incredibly talented group bringing a wealth of knowledge to the table here. So yeah, as far as at J&J, I'll tell you, when I first came to J&J, one of the things that attracted me to the operation was how standard they were. I came from an aviation background at the airlines, and I grew up with a father who was a pilot for United for 34 years. So standardization was kind of rooted in my core. And when it came to looking at, an operation in the corporate sector, I was looking for that. And that's really what I found at J&J. I'll tell you this, from the time that I was onboarded at Johnson & Johnson 8 years ago till right now, we continue to make significant improvements. And I think really it's all about exactly what you just said. Standardization and SOPs ultimately equals safety. And I think, I hate to belabor the concept that we're talking about with COVID-19, but the fact of the matter is that this is something that we're really dealing with right now. And the fact is that there's a lot of pent up demand for business travel, whether it be on the corporate side, 135 charter, whatever it might be. And once these vaccines roll out and people start traveling again, we're going to be flying airplanes again. So we need to be ready to do so. And this is something, to me, this is exactly what we should all be focused on right now, whether it's, stage 1 operators, all the way up to recurrent stage 3 like ourselves. We should all be focused on this. And the way we need to do that is by focusing on our SOPs.
Thanks, Jared. Hey, you mentioned large and small operators. I mean, obviously, I work for a large operator as well. All of us on this panel, we have a lot of resources available to us. There are many people out there that don't have the depth of resources that some of us may have or that others may have. And so some of the notes that I made that was shared with me from another Progressive Stage 3 leader was, how does this apply to smaller operations? And I'm just going to reference this individual's notes here for a second. So having a solid foundation for safe operations, it provides flexibility. You as an individual, as a small operator, maybe it's a one pilot operator. You're wearing many hats at multiple times during the day, or you have a select few individuals that are wearing multiple hats each. You're flexing your resources. And doing so, you're establishing a base. The right hand knows what the left hand is doing, and vice versa. Also, while your department may be small, it does allow you for growth if it does come, or it allows you to adapt to changes. You know where your center line is. Also on the panel today, we're honored to have Blair Robson with us. Blair, welcome. You've been living this for some time. We've had some great conversations about this prior to the discussion today. why was there a need for unification of SOPs within your work experience or your department?
Thank you, Gary, and I appreciate being on the board, on this panel board today, and very honored and humbled to be here. So let's answer your question, Gary. Back when I started with this large organization, we had as many as 11 airplanes in 3 different locations, and it was just after a merger of 2 large corporations, and there was 3 different flight log sheets, if you will. So I'll jump right into the details of that. 3 ways of handing over the ownership between the pilots and the maintenance, as far as is the airplane truly airworthy to fly. So a big mess to solve, and a big way of having to sit down and go through all the many details of how each flight log should look like. We all agree. Everybody's an A+ player, so we all had our great opinions of how the flight log should look. So it was quite a struggle sometimes, but it was very important to have everybody on the same page, to be able to say, this is our flight log, this is how we're going to do things. And again, whether it be internal audits within the corporation or external audits through IS-BAO or other sources, differences make a difference, right? They're easily written up if you have a difference. Well, he said this and she said that, and you have this piece of paper and he has that. So for us, standardization, as when I moved up through the corporation and became a manager, my boss at the time said standardization should be written across your forehead, because when you talk, everybody should know what you're saying. So I still keep that motto today as we go through those struggles. And then in 2010, we acquired another company, and at that time we had 14 airplanes and 4 different bases. So you can imagine standardization, SOPs, all being on the same page was extremely important, not only on the maintenance side, the operation side, and then those very important pieces of information that needs to come across as well. What is maintenance is done on the airplane, and how do we communicate that effectively and standardized so that everybody feels good about that the airplane truly is airworthy. And again, 91 versus 135, all of that came into play as well. So hope that answers your question, Gary.
No, it's a great conversation, Blair. And like we said at the very beginning, there's not enough time in the day to talk about why we should have unified SOPs. Blair, I'd like to keep you in the limelight here. We'll go into your presentation that we'll share with everybody here. Go ahead and advance the next slide, Catherine. I want to kind of set this up for Blair a little bit. And Blair, if you want to correct me, by all means, please correct whatever you need to correct. For the audience out there, as I mentioned, the last roundtable was focused on cabin experience between flight attendants, the flight crews. This roundtable, we're going to take a deeper dive into not only why, Blair briefly mentioned why, but how they created SOPs and what he used for his guiding light. Blair, I'm excited to hear more about for the next 15-20 minutes. Hear from you. Take us through the Australian CASA Human Factors for Engineers. Again, to the audience out there, this may be maintenance specific, but think about what resources you have out there at your fingertips, whether or not if it's for a specific SOP for your part of the operation, from line service to flight crews, cabin attendants to auditors. All of us have resources out there, and we adjust and adapt those resources to fit our operations. So Blair, walk us through the presentation. Let's take about 20 minutes. Again, I'm excited to hear this. So Blair, floor's yours.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Gary. So let me set this up a little bit for you. Back when I became my present position as the manager of aircraft maintenance and aviation facilities, an important part of that was to work on the idea of the soft skills. And the soft skills, as you can know, are human factors for for us as in the maintenance staff, and where is the best source of that? In our organization, we're all over the world, and one of my advisors out there in the big world told me about this package. This is a resource kit. So first of all, let me help you all understand that in Australia, if you are a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer, or in our terms, an aircraft maintenance technician, this is required training from the Australian CASA or their version of the FAA. So this is required training. Believe it or not, this is completely free training. I have had this for a long time, and all I had to do is write and ask for this resource kit. And later on, we will tell you exactly. But if you want to Google Australian CASA Human Factors for Engineers, you'll find it easily. You'll find the resource kit, and I'm going to pull a little bit out of that. There's 12 chapters of this, and it's a complete resource guide that you can work your way through. And it also has a video for each one of these chapters. So the chapters are, the introduction tells you why human factors are important for engineers. Error management, you're going to see a little bit of that today. Chapter 3 is human performance and its limitations. Chapter 4 is decision making. Chapter 5 is actually important for passing, getting through an IS-BAO audit, and that's fatigue management. And there truly is a fatigue management chapter just for aircraft maintenance technicians. Chapter 6, we'll talk a little bit about that today as well, and that's stress, workload, and time pressure. And we're going to talk about a process today called the focused maintenance environment, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. And it also talks about alcohol and other drugs. Communication, of course, is extremely important. That's what we're doing here today. Teamwork, leadership, and professionalism. And lastly, human factors within an organization. And that's what we're talking about, is aligned SOPs and those human factors for everybody in the flight department. So without further ado, Catherine, if you can advance the slide. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about error probabilities, and you may or may not have seen these types of information. Again, this is straight from Australia, and it's very interesting to me. I'll take you right to the very bottom of the page, and as we all know in the maintenance world, there is certain what we call special, or what we call RII tasks that need to be done. That means another required inspection. Whether it be a flight control, whether it be an engine or a wheel, whatever we decide that we want another set of eyes. Of course, if you're in a service center type of idea, there's always a second inspection. But I want you to look at that at the bottom is, yes, of course, the title of this slide is Estimated Error Probabilities on Maintenance Tasks. So 10% of the time, or 100 out of 1,000, we make a mistake when we check for an error in other person's work. Why? Why does that happen? Do we assume that my buddy always did it right? He always put the safety wire the right way? But it's interesting to note that when we check somebody else's work, we tend to overlook their error and go ahead and sign that inspection or make that stamp. And you notice the one right above it, install the lock wire. Safety wiring is not the funnest thing to do. Some are great at it, some are not so great. I'll admit, I'm not the best at it, and I always have somebody else look at it because it is a challenge to work safety wire in very, very tight places. But again, you have to safety wire anyway. So these are the kind of things that I've talked with my folks to understand that when we're asked to do an inspection of this caliber, that we know exactly the pitfalls that could happen with that. So moving on, the next slide, Catherine. Okay, error producing conditions. This is important. Time pressure. We all know that we want the airplane fixed yesterday. The pilots are wanting it. We need to make a trip. Time pressure is a pure given. Peer pressure. We always, hey, he did that pretty quick. Why can't you do it just as fast? So there's that. Perceived pressure. This is the interesting one for me. We perceive some type of pressure that isn't there. We think that something is going on where we need to get the airplane out, but we're not for sure. But we perceive a pressure that may never exist, but we perceive it. And again, your perception is your reality. And if you realize that you think there's a pressure out there, you're going to make, you may potentially make a mistake. Organizational norms, we always do it that way. We don't have to pay attention to that SOP. We always kind of do it that way. Those are practical drift ideas as well. Problems with equipment, tools, and spares. Again, if we have the right resources, we've got the right tools. We all know if you got the right tool for the job, things get done much easier. But sometimes you don't have that. Training and experience. Again, those folks that have the resources able to send their folks to flight safety or to CAE every year as a maintenance technician, that makes a difference. Coordination within maintenance. Well, I thought he said that. No, I think he wanted us to do this instead. So again, that's communication, right? Fatigue. It's very important in the maintenance world. We think that we can work at 7 in the morning, work till 7 at night, but there are those times, you know, and I teach the guys, and again, if you look into the fatigue chapter, it talks about there's 2 parts of your day that you're at your worst, and that's at 3 in the morning, at 3 in the afternoon. If you think about it, the Europeans always take tea time at 3 in the afternoon. Wonder why? Because they need a little caffeine hit. So think about those things. Think about the times you are good, and this chart shows you that, and it's in that chapter. 9 in the morning and 9 at night, you're at your best. So I always think about what time did this particular incident happen? What time of day? What was going on? All of that is important. Procedures and documentation, we're talking about it today. Did we have the right procedures? Is it a system issue? Or did we document it correctly? All of that. And again, supervision, making sure that the folks that need supervision get it. And if there's always questions, supervision is right there for you. So moving on to the next slide, Catherine. Examples of error-producing conditions. Again, look at the number 1 list on this, lack of familiarity with the task. There's a 17 times a risk factor for us to not get it right. Time shortage, there it goes back to that perceived pressure, that time pressure that's always there. Information overload, oh my gosh, that task card is forever. How am I going to get all this done, right? Poor feedback from the system. Maybe that task card isn't written correctly, and it leads me into a place that I just don't know if we're doing the right thing or not. And experience, again, there it shows up again in poor instructions or procedures. The SOPs just weren't written right. So this is important too, lack of familiarity with the task. This is where we need to take our time, brief that task card just as much as we brief everything else before we go flying, especially for the pilots. If you go back to the operational side, hey, we're going into a new airport today. Have we looked at the chart? Do we feel good about that approach procedure? Is it a circling approach? Boy, I haven't done one of those in a while. Do I feel good about that? Let's talk about this some more. Is there another way to do this? Those are the kind of things that we also do on the maintenance side. Is this task, I don't think, has anybody ever done one of these before? How do we do this? I don't know. Interesting. Well, we'll work our way through it. Those are the kind of times where you just step back, take your time, think about it, talk about it before you dive in with 2 feet and find yourself either breaking more things than you wanted to fix. So moving on to the next slide. Why people don't follow procedures. I don't know if you've all heard of, and again, it's inside of this resource kit, is pink and punk. Pink is procedural intentional non-compliance, and punk is procedural unintentional non-compliance. So those are kind of things that you can think about as you're doing your root cause analysis. Procedures are not followed because, 1, people prefer to rely on our own skills and expertise. Let's come over an intentional, right? We've decided that we've done this card 100 times. We've done that procedure 100 times. We don't need to look at that. It's fine. We got this, right? Or people assume they know what's in the procedure. Yeah, I think I know how to change that tire. It's fine. I know that, we got to get that off. We got to put that on. It can't be any different than that other airplane that I worked on before. Again, those are things that get us into a bind. If they were followed to the letter, the job could not be done in time. There's that long task card, right, that tells us to do all these operational checkouts. But you know what? The thing works. The green light is on. the good stuff is working, we're fine, right? People are not aware the procedure exists for the job they are doing. Oh, I didn't know that there was a task card for that. I didn't ever look in the maintenance manual to think, well, there may be something that relates to this. It's difficult to locate. Oh, I can't find it. That's interesting too. They do not describe the best way to carry out the work. They are too restrictive, or it's difficult to find the information you need. So again, all of these things are people that make those intentional or non-intentional non-compliance to SOPs. So let's move on to the next slide. Whenever you're ready, Catherine. Error management strategies. I won't spend a lot of time here because I want to really get into that focused maintenance environment, keeping careful of track of my time here. But the first objective, of course, should be to reduce errors by identifying, correcting, right? If we identify them, then we can correct them. Typical risk hazard analysis, right? You got to identify the hazard to be able to mitigate it. Performing principal systems or structure maintenance, we must review the current maintenance instructions. That's a must for all of us. We must document any additional disassemblies. Not sometimes always thought about, but it's important. We must document job status at the end of the shift, of course. Those handovers are extremely important. Also inside, and I didn't talk about it much at the beginning, but inside each one of these chapters are tremendous, wonderful case studies that you may or may not be aware of. The DC-10 accidents where they were using forklifts to change engines. And if we all remember what happened in Chicago, that DC-10, it did a roll right after takeoff because the engine fell off. That's talked about in these chapters, all sorts of different case management studies there. And we must confirm the integrity of each connection, right? Make sure everything's nice and tight. Let's complete all required checks and functional checks, and conduct a visual scan of everything. Does it look like we found it? Next slide, Catherine. Hopefully it moves. There we go. Okay, this is what I want to talk about here is the focused maintenance environment. This is a strategy. This is a mitigation strategy. A lot of my folks were talking about distractions. They're always, I got to go get the catering for the next flight, or I have to go answer that phone call, or somebody else wants something for something else, and I was busy trying to get my stuff done on this tire. So inside of that chapter 6, stress, workload, and time pressures, is this mitigation strategy that's now part of our SOPs, is a focused maintenance environment. For the pilots, think of this as the sterile cockpit at 10,000 feet. We're going to be super quiet and we're going to concentrate at the task at hand. We're going to land this airplane safely. Think about this the same way as aircraft maintenance operations. They're safety critical, and we'll talk about some of those examples here in a minute, but it is essential for us to reduce the number of distractions and interruptions, and this process or this procedure allows us to do that. Okay, next slide. Okay, great. So here are some of those examples. So let's go right down to it. And remember, this is leadership in action. The director of maintenance, the manager of aircraft maintenance, the supervisor, the lead technician, whatever title you'd like to use, and it doesn't have to be any of those leadership titles. It can be any maintenance technician. But here's good examples of that: tire changes, aircraft on jacks, hydraulic mules, scheduled maintenance inspections, and of course, troubleshooting an aircraft discrepancy. All of those are just small examples of major events that happen when we're inside the hangar working that are safety critical. We all know that the tire change is safety critical. We all know the aircraft on jacks is not where the airplane likes to be, nor do we like it up that high with sitting on just 3 little jacks. So that's an interest. Hydraulic mule, we got 3,000 pounds of PSI moving around with hoses that if something happens, somebody's going to get hurt. Scheduled maintenance inspection. We have a lot of tasks to do. We need to do it right, and we need to follow the task to the letter of the law. And of course, troubleshooting. Sometimes troubleshooting is not the fix is not out there for us to see. So we need to know what, we need to be quiet and work our way through it. Next slide, please. Okay, during a safety critical maintenance task conversation inside that focused maintenance environment, here's that sterile cockpit, should be task or safety related. Also, any phone conversations will be related to the task being accomplished. Just like I tell my guys, if your wife calls asking what you'd like for dinner tonight, tell her you call her back later. Or if you wanted to make a call and tell her what you'd like for dinner, wait until you're done with this task, okay? Interruptions from internal or external sources should only occur when relevant to the task. If you're on the phone with technical ops, or with your field service rep, that's important because that's what you're working on. Okay, next slide. Okay, so if a safety critical maintenance task, let's talk about this, the recovery process. So it's time for lunch, right? It's time for lunch, and we're going to stop what we're doing. We're going to walk out of that cone of silence, if you will, out of that sterile idea around that airplane. And when we come back from lunch, we're going to go back 3 steps in that task to make sure that we've covered those 3 already and we're moving forward. So place a marker and go 3 back so that you make sure that you did not miss anything. That's critically important that all of those objects go back 3 and then you can move forward. If you know that those 3 are done and you feel good about it, then keep going. But you have to go back a little bit in order to go forward. That's important. Okay, next slide. So here's the other important. Everybody has to know in the hangar to that this is going on. So in the morning briefing, when we have a morning briefing, we have it in every location we're at. We make sure that we communicate in an email, a phone call, in any way possible to let people know that we're going to have a focused maintenance environment task them today, and these people will be doing that task. And please ask anybody but those people involved if you have some catering to get to or something else to do. These folks, leave them alone until their task is complete. Next slide. Okay, we got to have a visual sign, right? There's a visual sign. And basically, we put these cones around there. So truly we have a cone of silence, and that's our cone of silence. And as you can tell, safety critical maintenance, do not disturb. So that's our way of visually telling folks, in case they forgot, they got that email or forgot that phone call, there's a visual representation of, look, we got some safety critical maintenance going on, and please talk to somebody else besides these folks inside that cone. And I'm almost right on time, and I think that wraps it up for me. Back to you, Gary.
Hey, Blair, awesome presentation, awesome review. You caused me to pause and think about a number of things, not only on what's going on in your organization from the maintenance side, but also what I can do maybe from the flight crew side on the flight deck. So I'd like to invite Jared and Amanda to rejoin us again. Jared, my question to you is, why should you know what Blair and the maintenance team and the rest of the facility team are doing? Why should you care about their SOPs?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gary. And first, Blair, that presentation is fantastic. So many useful concepts in there. I hope a lot of our maintenance guys are on the call. I'm sure they'd get something out of this too. Nevertheless, the question is why, right? So at the end of the day, yes, in an aviation department, we're broken down into different groups, right? Flight operations, maintenance, dispatch, administration. But we're all focused on one goal, right? To safely operate together, to safely get the mission done. And at the end of the day, having a fine understanding of the procedures and protocols that each one of those sectors follows is key to accomplishing your unified mission, right? The question is, well, how do you do that? It's not the easiest thing to do in the world, right? But at the end of the day, I think we have to rely on a bunch of things. Number one, checking yourself against a standard, right? So fortunately, IS-BAO is here, and we're able to use that standard and constantly check ourselves. You know, PS3, I think, has been a game changer for us in the sense that, you know, we're able to look at a different portion of our operation every year, and that really changes the game. So that's number one, is using the IS-BAO. Number two, using a training provider. Fortunately, you know, Johnson & Johnson, we do, you know, we have access to certain things, specifically flight safety, where we can train to focus and learn these standards. One of the problems is, though, I think with a training provider is that, you know, they know the standard that they train. They don't necessarily know the standard that you deal with in your particular operations. So yes, it is good for certain standard operating procedures, but at the end of the day, each organization really does have their own. Well, so how do you address that? To be honest, I think culture is key. If you have what James Reason refers to as an ideal culture, right? I don't know that any of us have an ideal culture, but we can certainly all strive for that. There's five components in there. It's a reporting culture, an informed culture, a learning culture, a just culture, and certainly a flexible culture. If you look at those five components, those are key in helping unify your standards. It's just, yeah, it's absolutely essential, I think, to accomplish the end goal of safety.
Thanks, Jared. Hey, Blair, quick question for you. I'm going to put you on the spot here. 60 seconds. In 60 seconds, why is it important for you and your team to know what Jared's SOPs are on the flight deck?
Well, we have a very unique position here at our company, and you'll know it as soon as you see my email at the end. But it's important because we do a 3-man flight crew. We are actually, as flight engineers, involved in the we are involved in flying the airplane, meaning that none of our large cabin airplanes fly without 3 people on board, 2 pilots and a flight engineer. We are responsible for reading the normal and the emergency checklist. We do go to the simulators with the pilots because that's how we fly. You fly like you train like you fly. So we can be responsible for a bad sim session as well as the pilots can be, or a great one, meaning that the CRM is excellent. We found the right emergency checklist to find. We read it, we all worked through it. And again, we only talk with the co-pilot or the pilot monitoring or the right seater, however you like to call it in your flight department, and we let the pilot fly the airplane. And so our organization has been that way for a long time. I didn't invent it. And that's why we need to know the SOPs of the pilots, because we are truly a flight crew member when we're doing that.
Gary, can I just expand on that for one moment?
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, our operation travels with flight engineers on every flight as well. And Blair and I have connected on the back end, and I've connected him with some of our one of our maintenance engineers, who's a leader in our department. And while we do fly with flight engineers, we don't regularly take our engineers to the training facility with us. And this is something that we're going to explore. Again, they sit up in the jump seat with us and they bring a wealth of knowledge. And I think, you know, having, again, this unified understanding of our SOP in the cockpit would be an absolute game changer. And in order to do that, going to the simulator, I think, is the way to go. So, you know, again, I think this just kind of highlights the importance of having a webinar like this and having the PS3 leadership group or whatever leadership groups are out there, is you're able to collaborate with one another and share these experiences and share these strategies and techniques. And really, some of the suggestions that Blair has made, I think bring real value to our department, and we're exploring, you know, going down those avenues at J&J as well.
Jared,
Okay,
I would
thanks,
like
Jared.
to dovetail.
Yeah,
I would love to dovetail.
You next.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
So I want to challenge our industry to think about your SOPs differently. I can't tell you how many times I walk into an audit and I get challenged about, we don't want to write this down. The question you have to ask yourself, though, is we're not asking you to write down how you unlock the door at your hangar. What we're asking you to write down is the different various expectations as it relates to the safety of your organization. How your team is going to do something to make sure that you stay within regulatory compliance, within company expectations. And I think when you look at your SOPs and everything that you have laid out for your team and how they're going to do their job and what they're expected to do and in what ways they're expected to do it, when you look at that, you should ask yourself these questions. If I leave something out of my manual, am I going to be at liability or risk if we had an accident and this went to court and I was expected to show that, how do I show proof that we do things a certain way? We are now in the age where pilots are being prosecuted. Perfect example was the 2006 Brazil accident, where we had a U.S. aircraft that flipped the airliner of a Brazilian aircraft, Gol Airlines. And those pilots in Brazil were trying to process and prosecute those pilots for murder. And so I think our industry has really shifted a lot. And so when I talk with my operators and the clients and the IS-BAO group about why do we have to document all this stuff? My people just know what they're doing. It's not because that your people don't know what you're doing. It's because you want to make sure that from all aspects as a leader and as a team member in an organization, that one, you protect yourself and your family first. And two, you protect the company and you protect the assets and you protect our industry. And so I think as a whole, when you look at your SOPs, if you've left something out or you're challenging about leaving something out, ask yourself why you're leaving it out and ask yourself, if I leave this out, could I be liable? Would it ever come up in an accident? And is it something that, from a process perspective, that my team, if this team isn't here and we have new young team members coming into our organization as our generation starts to retire and all that knowledge starts to leave, what will they need to know? So that's what I'm going to challenge our industry with.
Amanda, thank you for your comments as well. One final thought on the why, and I'm going to ask the panel to pivot to how. Obviously, we could talk about how we do this all day long. Let's just say I have a friend, okay, that's been with the same organization for 41 years. He or she may be getting close to retirement. He or she may have been all over the world, but I know he or she, they're still learning. They're still learning. Yes, I'm talking about myself. There's still so much out there to learn. And regardless of who I learn it from, it's important to really, truly do that in a continuous operational environment. So I'd like to the panel, let's pivot to how. I wrote down a number of comments that each of you made. It's about the people, the customers, the company. It's about morning briefings. That's one of the hows. Training working with our training providers. Blair, you went through a number of hows or how to execute that. So again, Blair, let's start with you. And let's wrap this up here in about 10 minutes. So if each one of you take 3 to 4 minutes and talk about how do we do this. One of the key things that I want to make sure we address, and I'll throw it out there, is leadership in action. Obviously, it starts at the top. Blair, what else do you want? What else would you like to add for how does an individual develop unified SOPs?
Well, I believe for us, for our corporation, as large as it is, and again, not everybody is as large as we're fortunate to be. But at the same time, you have to leadership. Again, it's number one in the SMS elements, right? Leadership and commitment. If leadership is not committed, then it all seems to fall apart after that, right? And a continual leadership commitment will allow things for allow for processes to work, allow for that just culture, allow for constant improvement. That's the biggest thing for us, is always constantly improve and never feel like we're there. We get audited. In fact, we're in the middle of an audit right now internally with the corporation. We have two different. We have a controls audit and we have a operational audit, and then of course we have IS-BAO and all of those things that come to us to keep us continually improving. And you know, all of the auditors, and I think Amanda would agree, you're here to improve our organization. And how can we keep improving? And some folks say, well, I don't like audits. They're difficult. You have to look in the mirror. But yes, we want to continually improve. If we don't, then I think there's only one direction, and that's going, you know, either stagnant or backsliding, and that's that practical drift. And we've talked about that a little bit today. Is I always constantly worry about practical drift with myself and with my folks, is to make sure that we never stray from what we've all agreed to in our manuals, in our SOPs, that we never practically assume that those organizational norms creep into our everyday lives at work. Because when that starts happening, mistakes start happening, and that's when we find ourselves having to make an unfortunate report or something like that. So for us, it's always, even when we have our own maintenance standardization committee, and we meet every 6 months to look over the manual that we've written for ourselves, to answer the bell for any audit discussion point that we need to improve upon ourselves, to make sure that we're always on top of our game. As much as I know that, in fact, at the place I'm at today, they had two meetings. They had one for standards only. And then the second meeting was what they call a core business safety meeting. So truly the business of flying airplanes. They had a meeting with all of their pilots today here to make sure that we're all on the same page. So nothing is left for chance. Nothing is left for assumed. And again, in this COVID environment, when we're not flying as much, that is super critical for us to always be on top of our game. That yes, we fly the airplanes a little bit for currency issues, but that muscle memory, if you will, the muscle memory here and the muscle memory in our hands is not lost. And again, the airplane is not forgiving if we start pushing the wrong buttons or making the wrong moves in the cockpit. Same goes for us on the maintenance floors. We're not moving as much. The calendar inspections still go. The calendar still keeps clipping by, and some of those calendar inspections still get done. But the ins and outs of flying a lot and doing those launch and recoveries and doing post flights and pre-flights, that's just not as often. So we always have to make sure that our practical drift doesn't get into our game at all. Back to you, Gary.
All right, thanks, Blair. So what I heard is, I mean, obviously it starts with leadership. We could have an entire session all day long about how do we develop the leadership and getting alignment at the top. I heard briefings. A key part of that in your organization is all the various briefings, the committees, a collective group committee, and even specialized committees for standardization within the maintenance. I want to pivot to Jared. Jared, how did you and the leadership team go about aligning SOPs at your organization? And then Amanda, I want you to add your worth as well, your 2 cents worth as far as what do you see out there, how operators are getting to that point. So Jared, how did you do it at your organization?
Yeah, Gary. So in addition to the things that I had cited before, specifically as IS-BAO and flight safety and such and culture, I think it's important that we look at what we do on a day-to-day basis, not just like a macro picture, right? So I look at it as a two-way street, okay? We as professionals, aviation professionals, we have a responsibility to ourselves, to our passengers, to our crews, to keep an open mind and accept criticism, accept feedback, realize that you don't know it all. I'm going to reference my father again, but just because he flew airplanes for 40 years and flew airliners for 36. And, you know, he always told me up until the last day that he flew that airplane, he always learned something. And that always resonated with me. And every time I get in that cockpit, that's the way I approach it. There's always going to be someone who knows more than me. There's always going to be somebody who's smoother than me. There's always going to be more information that I can take in to make me a better professional. So there has to be a certain level of humility that goes on within your organization and within you as an individual, right? But on the flip side of that, there's accountability. We have to be comfortable enough with one another. We have to be comfortable enough with our team, right? We have to be comfortable enough to be the guy or be the lady to point out when there may be an issue, when something might not be so standard, you know, and that all goes back to culture, like I was talking about. I think, you know, and here we are in 2021, and look, there's a lot more focus on interpersonal skills, right? But I don't even know if we put enough focus on that, because the bottom line, Gary, you could have, you know, 30 years of experience and I could have 20 years of experience, and we could have, you know, whatever, 25,000 hours, and Blair, you could be in there with, you know, however many years of experience on the maintenance department. But at the end of the day, if you have walls up, there's a total breakdown in CRM. And if you have a total breakdown in CRM, then your safety net is going out the window. So it really doesn't make a difference what you know at that point. So the bottom line to me, again, it goes back, it's a two-way street. Your responsibility as a professional to do what's right and realize that there's more to learn, to realize that there's a possibility that you are not doing something right. And then on the flip side, being the person who can actually hold someone else accountable and doing it tactfully, doing it diplomatically. And again, it all comes back to culture. Hope that answers your question.
It does. And I mean, obviously it probably generates many more questions. Amanda, let's bring it home. Let's wrap it up here. Just a heads up, Catherine, let's start the Q&A. After Amanda, I'll have a few closing comments, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, and so that all the panel members can participate. So Amanda, bring it home. How does an organization do this, large or small?
So if you look at a process in lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, they call it process mining. And what process mining is you need to know how your process occurs first. And then you analyze that process, whatever you're going to do, whatever that might be, whether it be in maintenance or ground service or in the cabin attendant side of the house. But you need to say what you're doing and make sure that that is on paper. So you take apart and you analyze those processes through process mining. And then you document that workflow process and then make sure that your documentation actually matches what you actually are doing out in the real world. That's a principle that we can take home from Six Sigma. Documentation, making sure it's communicated, train our team, making sure that it's consistent, and we regularly exercise that, right? Especially now in the middle of COVID and not flying as much, and our operations some of us have come to a halt as much as some of us are just doing proficiency flying at this point. So those are some of the hows. You have to focus on it. It needs to be a focal point of your organization, not only just when you establish your organization, but moving forward. It needs to be a team effort. Leadership is critical. I can't tell you how many times from an auditor perspective, when I walk into an organization, one of the things that I do is I examine leadership. They don't know it, but that's what I'm doing. Because for me, that sets the tone. If you have a disgruntled leader, if you have somebody that doesn't want to be at work, if you have somebody yelling at you, you don't have really a just culture. Let me just define what a just culture is and where we should be. You know, different operators are different levels in their journey of SMS. A just culture and where you want to be as an organization is when something happens. And I mean something big happens. Not just small, but big. You want to say to yourself and the team, what can we learn from this? What can we learn from this as a team? And how do we ensure that it never happens again? That's just culture. Not pulling somebody into, you know, the chief pilot's office or the director of aviation's office and yelling at them and telling them they did this bad, but getting down to root cause. What happened and how do we ensure it never happens again? That is just culture. And you know that you've arrived when you've had a bad incident in an operation. Maybe it's cost you insurance claim. And your team can sit around the table and look at each other and have a discussion and say, how do we learn from this? And how do we make sure that this doesn't ever happen again to one of us? Because we're human and we all make mistakes. So I want you guys to take those principles home with you. I want you to focus on those things. We're at a period in our time right now where we can focus on other things. Look at that process mining and figure out, are we doing what we should be doing? And if we're not, maybe we need to bring up and enhance our SOPs to make sure that we can build and grow that just culture. Back to you, Gary.
Thank you, Amanda, and Blair and Jared. Thank you very much for your participation today. Catherine, let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. I've got a few closing comments that, I sat here and made so many notes that I'm going to reorganize my notes and ask myself, how can I apply this into my personal my profession, for me, maybe our organization. Some of the key notes that I took away that I'd like to share with the audience: the importance of communicating and coordinating through briefings. It removes assumptions, provides a clear message. And so when you're out there sharing this information, the information needs to be clear, needs to be concise, and it needs to be consistent. We do that through the SOPs by documenting our expectations. And so when we need to go back to slower operational experiences so that we do not forget or leave anything in our SOPs undone or oversight, we're taking care of the details, focusing on the details. One final note, another note that I wrote down that it caused me to pause and think, listening to the three of you today. And one of the sayings we have in our organization: feedback is a gift, as long as it's done respectfully and through the right channels. An SOP helps document that. It helps the organization, through organizational leadership. How do we report? Who do we report? How do we share it? Being transparent. So with that, again, thank you, Blair, Amanda, Jared, for participating. Catherine, if you would join us now, please. And let's go to the next slide. And Catherine, what kind of questions do you have rolling in out there?
All right, the questions that I have rolling in are very interesting, and we have a few minutes to do this, so great on your timing. What a fantastic panel and great information, you guys. Thank you so much for sharing that and sharing your expertise. I'm going to start with, there's a couple questions on the concept of practical drift. And the one question, these two are related. I would be interested in the panel's thought on dealing with practical drift / normative behaviors if they become established within the operation. And that related to that is another question saying, how can an organization stay on top of this where a department may make their own adjustments to an SOP that's theoretically aligned? So what are some of your thoughts about addressing those issues?
Well, I'll say one word, and that's establishing expectations and following through. And somebody on the panel, I forget who, mentioned you got to be comfortable with accountability. That's my 2 cents worth. Blair, Amanda, Jared, jump in.
Yeah, I'll since I used that term quite a bit today, practical drift. But yeah, let's put it this way: I'm not at my home base today. And, I know what the SOPs are for the maintenance department. I know, because we're involved in writing every ounce of them. So as I go around, you watch somebody, you do something, you go, wait a minute, that's just a little bit not quite right, and if you can make those quite little, hey, let's talk about that a minute. Why, do you have a better way? Let's talk about this and do it in a constructive, just culture type of way and say, okay, do we want to bring that up in our standardization meeting? Have you found a better way? And if you have, great, but let's do it the way it is stated until we talk about it and change the manual. So it's always a constant little look. I mean, I do that even now with the responsibility for the hangars themselves, is I look around and I'll say, you know, why are we living with that? Oh, yeah, we have that power to fix that. Let's fix that. And so those are kind of things. It's a constant thinking about one, standardization. Again, it's written across my forehead. And two, what was written in the manual and what we decided to live with and live by.
Thanks, Blair.
I would
Amanda?
like to just make some comments. What I see in the industry is there's a variety of things that operators are doing to ensure that we're not drifting, right? We're not moving too far off the line. Some groups will actually take their internal audit program and as an examination of their IS-BAO procedures or regulations or compliance with ICAO, they will actually do a manual review where they, you know, and I'm not just talking high level, I'm talking read the manual and challenge each other on a safety committee, a peer group, if a safety manager or safety officer leads it, but identify all the areas in your manual on a yearly basis that things have changed, we need to enhance, we need to add to it, we need to delete this, we're not really doing it this way anymore. Because I think there's going to be a lot of that coming up where our operations are changing, and they're changing dynamically right now, probably faster than the last 20 years I've been in aviation altogether. And so using your internal audit process or establishing a time frame once a year, beginning of the year, end of the year, middle of the year when things are quiet, to really self-examine your manual and really read through it from start to stop and identify those processes as a process mining that it's not working. We need to add to this. Or you know what, there's a big missing hole here that leaves us for liability. So that's, you know, those are some suggestions for operators to be able to tackle that.
Yeah, Amanda, I'm just going to expand on that with because I completely agree with you. I see this as a two-part situation here. I can tell you at J&J, we continually go through our manual to make sure that the manual says what we do and that we actually do what the manual says, right? It's not an easy thing to do, but it certainly does keep you on your feet and it keeps you in the game. And I think that's it. You know, you got to have people who are fully engaged. So again, I hate to draw back to culture, but it does. Culture is what dictates engagement levels, in my opinion. Yeah, so I will tell you this, we put out a quarterly safety newsletter, and it's not just a safety newsletter. Our newsletter encompasses all different, you know, functions of our business, standards, training, safety, management, and everybody contributes. So just that contribution alone from the entire team helps. We include quizzes in there, just, you know, quizzes to do on your own, multiple choice type things that make you actually dive into your manual. So I think creativity is part of it. You've got to be creative in the way that you keep people in your manuals and keep people up to date with your SOPs.
I like the use of creativity. I think that's great. And it goes to another question that just popped up that I think is related to this. How do you stay on the cutting edge of buy-in with your entire department? Seems like that's one of the tools you might utilize.
Yeah. Again, and I'm going to say culture. How do you keep the buy-in? You have to continually demonstrate relevance. You know, again, go talk about James Reason and his ideas of, you know, an ideal culture and flexibility. You have to be willing to be flexible and adopt new ideas. You have to be willing to try things. You got to be brave, be courageous, be daring. You really do. There's a certain, I'm not saying that you should be that in the cockpit, but you should explore different things in order to help further your department.
So I would like to dovetail a little bit off of what Jared is talking about. So buy-in equals an engaged team. How do you get your team to be one of the most engaged organizations out there? You know, whether you're in a corporate flight department and you want to be the most engaged team, or you have your own flight organization, you give a piece of your pie to each team member. As a leader, the best thing to do is for you to delegate and find out what your individual staff and employees, what their skills are. Some people are going to be really good at technical computer skills. Some people are going to be really good at organizing. Some people are going to have a passion for safety. And it's your job as a leader to bring that out in people and then turn that and say, here, I'm going to give you a piece of the pie. I'm going to give you a piece of this organization so you can grow that passion and we can fuel you and we can fuel your skill set so that we can drive the most engaged team that this industry has ever seen. Because when all those things happen together and the leadership turns their leading around and say, team, you lead this organization, you're the ones that are on the front line, engagement will come full circle. And so will SOPs and so will the culture. It's an incredible thing. And when you've been in an organization like that and you've seen it for yourself, it's truly an incredible process to go through. I am a big advocate for a book called Turn the Ship Around about leadership. And if you've not read it as a leader, I recommend reading it. It's a phenomenal read about leadership and how to drive engagement.
That's great. Someone in the audience just said they do funny videos, newsletters, podcasts. I think there's room for a buy-in think tank for sure, which is a really nice way of thinking about that. Thanks for that. So let's just say for this one, things have been kind of slow right now. So what would you all recommend about steps we could take now to start working on standardizing SOPs across the organization before we get too busy again, right?
Yeah, Catherine, we've all made some contributions to your question already, and I'll just wrap it up in 30 seconds. Continuous conversations, having various delegating assignments, putting people where their strengths are at, asking for their feedback, and before you know it, buy-in automatically happens. But being transparent, it doesn't just happen overnight. It's going to take time, but having continuous conversations within each specific group in your organization and then as a collective group, it helps remove transparency. It does help drive alignment, gives people an opportunity to have a voice. And as a collective group, we have a saying, we win as one.
Continuous conversation. I like that. So this also just popped up, which brings up something that is a topic. Any advice to standardize your contracted maintenance? How do we look at this outside of our own organizations? I see lots of
Yeah,
That's a great.
Blair.
Since you said the word maintenance, I'll jump in there if you like.
Yes.
Okay. It's important for us. You know, we stay with our OEM to do our outside maintenance. We're again fortunate to work with our procurement department to get into more of a sole source provider, if you will, with our OEM, so that we know that when we go to sell an airplane, either it was one of our employees or that OEM that touched that airplane, period, end of statement. Not everybody has that ability. Some people have to shop out their maintenance or figure out which is the best, who's got the best price today for this inspection. That's where it gets a little harder to manage. And I encourage anybody that is in that group, because I used to have to do that, is to go visit that service center that wants your business long before your airplane arrives, and spend some quality time with the people that's going to be touching your airplane and making sure you feel good about that. So again, we talked about briefings a lot. The briefing, of course, as the day you enter is extremely important. The briefing before you even come with your airplane, again, is extremely important. But I would add another level, the meeting or briefing you have with no pressures of an upcoming inspection or a visit in mind. Just go visit the facility and walk around and fully decide. It's kind of like shopping for cars. Is that the kind of car that's going to make me feel comfortable and get me where I need to go? Or is this something that I need to go keep looking for the right kind of car? It's kind of like as I heard before, the Goldilocks idea, right? This one fits just right.
Nice.
And do that without the pressure on you of having to bring an airplane in.
Right.
I have some additions to what Blair is talking about. So some of the operators, especially our big fractional carriers, and 135 operators that are 10 or more, are required to do what we call a CAS program. It's a continuing airworthiness surveillance program. And that program, interestingly enough, some of the groups are actually standing up data analysis and collection as part of that. That's a part of CAS. Some of those groups, though, what they're doing is they're monitoring their maintenance vendors based on errors or type of errors. So they would have, 10 maintenance contracted vendors on a graph, and they would be tracking how many errors pertaining to paperwork that they've had. And they would do it over a month, January through December type of a time frame. And they're plotting that on charts. And it's super powerful. I can tell you that when it comes to SMS and maintenance, we have a long ways to go. And that's a whole another hour and a half discussion that we could have, Blair. But the data analysis piece of SMS that the FAA and ICAO is looking for when it comes to maintenance. I mean, FOQA is easy for flight operations, but what about maintenance? So CAS has become kind of the driver for helping us as an industry develop those data metrics, but it's very easy to take some of the internal audits that you might develop for maintenance and go ahead and establish data metrics and graphs based on the errors and based on the things that the operator is seeing with the interactions with their airplane. You can send somebody on site, as Blair said, but if you're not able to do that, I would highly stress that you use your audit program to develop some type of audit that you make that group go through before you just voluntarily turn over your airplane to them.
And let me just quickly add, you talk about CAS reports. That's another fun thing that I could spend another 5 hours talking about. But believe it or not, Amanda, I do my own, even though I'm a 91 operator and have a sole source. I do my own CAS report that I've done for 10 years now. And it's very helpful in certain situations to prove things, how we're doing versus how we're not doing. So yes, I believe it or not, even as a 91 operator, I do it.
That's fantastic. Very
Awesome.
unusual for a 91 operator. That's awesome.
Thanks, you guys. I think we are at our last minute or two here, so I would like to just see, Gary, do you have any members of the panelists? We didn't get to all the questions. I am going to actually, let me see if you all have any closing statements, and then I will wrap this up. So Gary, Amanda, Jared, Blair, thank you so much. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, the one final thought for me is, we've been a stage 3 operator for a number of years, and this new program, the Progressive Stage 3, what I realize is that instead of being challenged every 3 years and then relaxing, going, okay, well, we've got that finished, we're already preparing for the next audit. It helps us keep the edge, a sharp edge. It helps us stay focused on our commitment to what we say we're going to do.
Great. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate this. We all here at IBAC appreciate the efforts that the PS3 leadership team, that our panelists today have put into today's webinar. It's fantastic information. I have extra questions, some that also, go even further and talk about how do you actually balance the balance between pushing for standardization and accepting that your SOPs may not anticipate everything. And that goes into that continuous conversation, I think, that you guys have been talking about, and continuous improvement. So my promise to those of you who have asked questions is I will send them on to our panel and they can answer them in their own time. And also you see that there is contact information on this final slide. Feel free to email our panelists. We'd love to hear from you all. I wanted to just thank you all so much for attending today. We are going to have another exciting roundtable coming up. I would imagine this is February, sometime in March, April area. And so please keep an eye out for an invitation to that. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, please let us know. And thank you all very much for attending, and to our panelists, a very deep, grateful thanks to you for all of your efforts and your sharing your expertise here today. So thanks everyone, and we will see you on the next roundtable.